So I'd like to invite Tom in N6H to come up. Tom's going to be giving us a presentation on the digital capabilities of our repeaters, how to use those digital capabilities, and the proper protocols. But before I do that, I sent you a request. You remember what it was?
Request to be here?
Well, definitely to be here. That's a good one. But I asked you for a little background information, a little bio information.
Oh.
So you didn't provide that. That's okay, because now I'm just going to draw it out of you. I'm just going to force you to talk about it.
Okay.
So I've known you for about a year. I think we met the first time at the Coffee and Donuts in Meta Vista, right?
I actually think it was at the Georgetown Airport.
Okay.
Oh, Georgetown Airport.
Okay. So just a couple questions, just to introduce you. How long have you been in ham radio?
Since I was 14, which is a long time. I think it was 1964 or something.
Okay. Great. And when did you upgrade to an extra?
Well, I actually got my general class first, then I upgraded to an advanced, and then I went up to extra class, I don't know, maybe about 20 years ago.
Okay. Cool. And professionally, are you retired? Are you still working?
I am retired, but I'm working more than I did before, unfortunately, with all the volunteer stuff. But I am a retired engineer, computer engineer, software, hardware, involved in a lot of microsystems back when they first came out, and IBM PCs and all that type of stuff.
Excellent. So with that, I'll get out of the way and let you proceed, but thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. There you go. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to be interrogated. So, again, my name is Tom Newman, NN6H, and like I say, I've been with the club for about a year now. And so I've been working on some of the things that have been in the repeater, in the vault, as we call it. So the title of this thing is the W6EK repeater. Oh, sorry. The W6EK repeater digital access. In reality, it's really all access. You know, everybody wants an all access pass, and that's kind of what we have here. So I'm going to be talking about kind of how you access the repeater. And a lot of people will say, well, you just pick up the microphone and talk, right? Or a chunk, or whatever you want to do. So what I'm going to cover in this presentation is, first off, is the digital access, which is really just kind of all access on the repeater, and also the digital modes. We have All-Star, WiresX, Echolink, and so on. I'm going to talk about the vault. People talk about the vault a lot, and what is the vault? I'm going to talk about ways to access the repeaters, so that, you know, not just in the digital sense, but also RF and other ways. Then going to talk a little bit about repeater, I guess, and digital etiquette, just kind of some of the things you should be doing on the repeater or on the nodes or whatever, however you're accessing the repeaters. Now, this is going to be, when I first talked to Graydon, I thought this is going to be a tech 1 hour, so I made a long presentation here. So I didn't realize it was actually a tech 15. But anyway, there's a lot of information here, and I'll try to go through it and not take up everybody's time. There is a lot of information, and hopefully it's useful. So the vault, well, where is it? Well, it's located in Auburn. You know, it's around 1,500 feet. And there are 4 repeaters in the vault, not just 3. There's 4. We have a 2-meter repeater, and that uses a Yaesu DR2X, which is actually a combination C4 FM as well as analog. And then we have a 1.25 meters, which is 220. Which is a Bridgecom. That's a brand new repeater that we just acquired, and Clyde has kind of been getting into the vault for 220. We have a 70 centimeter, which is the 440. That's also a DR2X, the same as we use for the 2 meters. And then we have a spare. There's a spare DR2, just in case we need it for the 440 or something else. And then besides that, there's a 10-meter receiver there, which is actually kind of, we're using it, I guess somebody else is using it there. It has an antenna, and it's actually being linked to a 440 link for a 10-meter transmitter miles away. And that's not owned by W6EK or the club. And then top that off, we have everything runs on battery, so everything is battery powered. So in case of an AC failure, it can actually run, and we just use AC for charging. Now the 2-meter repeater I mentioned, it uses a Yaesu DR2X. This repeater is a combination, digital and analog, but we're using it in the analog only mode with an ARCOM 210 controller. It outputs 20 watts because it is on battery power, and it goes into a linear amplifier, which we don't really have used right now. So the way to access that, we have RF, which a lot of everybody uses. We have All-Star, so this is tied to our node 51018. We've probably heard talk about the clear node and the clear node net, and that's kind of the node that everybody gets into. We have Echolink, and so that's W6EK-R, Echolink. We have Wires X, and we have Wires X in the analog mode. And then we have Broadcastify. So if you just wanted to listen, or somebody who didn't have a license, they can go to Broadcastify and actually listen to the 2-meter repeater. So on Wires X, it is analog, and it's tied to the W6EK 2-meter room, and that room, the node number is, or the room number is 62545. So, which means that if you were on another repeater, you could actually get into it using that node on Wires X. It has an HR200, which is a Yaesu Wires X interface, and that is in the vault, and that is tied directly into from the internet into the repeater itself through the ARCOM controller. There's no RF connection. A lot of times the HR200 is actually used with the radio and broadcast into the repeater. There is a way that you can switch the rooms, which I just learned, and you can use DTMF to do that. Normally on a digital radio, you'd use the Wires X button, and you would be able to actually get to a new node that way. On this repeater, you can actually use DTMF with the pound sign and then a 5-digit node number that you want to move to, a room number. And then when you want to disconnect from that room, you would enter the pound sign plus the 5 nines, and that would disconnect you. And this doesn't automatically come back to the room. So if you do move it someplace else for some reason, please redirect it back to the node 62545. The 220 repeater there, which is now a Bridgecom repeater. This is brand new, and it is also connected with a ARCOM 210 controller. Right now, I don't think the controller is actually hooked up. I think Clyde said it would be hooked up this weekend. That actually is putting out 30 watts. It's going to an antenna that's kind of compromised right now. It's not up where it really should be. So hopefully that'll be up in the future here, and we'll get it up higher. Ways to access this repeater is through RF. You can also access it through an All-Star node, which is 56039. And then Broadcastify also, so you can actually just listen only. The nice thing about this, using All-Star on the 2-meter and on the 220, is that we can actually link the two together. And you probably heard us link it for certain events, and for our areas, we actually will connect the two repeaters together. We do that by connecting, doing some DTMF commands on the 2-meter side to connect it to the 220 side. On the 440 repeater, it is also used, like I say, the DR2X, but this time instead of being in analog mode, we use it in C4 FM mode only. So it does not have analog capability the way it's configured. With the ARCOM 210 controller. So the output for that, since it's also operating on battery, is 20 watts. And the way to access that, again, through RF. You can also access it through IMRS, which is Internet Linked Multi-Site Repeater System. And if you do this, and I'll give you an example in the next slide, it will connect to Ken's repeater system, which is a KA6 SUB, the Gold Run repeater, and then he actually has a network of repeaters that it's connected to up and down the state and some other states. So you can do it that way. We also have Wires X, and this is on the C4 FM side, And this is actually using the same HRI 200 that we use for 2 meters, or I mean, it's the same type of device, but it's being used RF-wise from Roseville. It's actually in Clyde's house, and it's actually broadcast from RF to the repeater, and that connects into the internet. So that allows us to connect into to the Sierra NorCal room through into the repeater. So we also have a YSF and FCS rooms, and you can access those through a Zoom spot or OpenSpot, which is an MMDVM type controller. And you can also, there's also some software that you can use to access that. So that's a capability. And then it also has Broadcastify if you actually want to listen to it only without getting access. Transmit. So there are two YSF FCS rooms. One is the Sierra NorCal room, which is FCS 360. And then there's another one, which is the YouTubers, which is FCS 348. Now these are all permanently connected into the repeater through RF using two open spots that are actually in the vault that are running in duplex mode. So the repeater is always constantly connected to those two rooms for both in and out traffic. Yeah, and then I mentioned before, you can use an open spot or a Zoom spot to actually access those rooms. So you can actually go into the Fusion on your Zoom spot or your open spot and actually access those two rooms and get into the 440 repeater that way. As for Wires X, it can be accessed like you would normally do a normal Wires X room using C4 FM. You can do it directly, or you can do it through other C4 FM repeaters that allow you to redirect. So like over in Scott K7AIR, you can actually direct his repeater to our room and use it that way. It defaults to the Sierra NorCal, the Wires X Sierra NorCal room. This room is different from the YSF SCS room that I mentioned before. This is a Wires X only room, and it has a node number of 62998. And you can with Wires X, you can take the repeater and you can direct it to another Wires X node if you want to, or room. All we ask is that when you're done, please return it back to the Sierra NorCal, which would be go back to the 62998 room if you change it. The IMRS system, which is that link system that I mentioned for the for KA6 SUB Gold Run repeater. This allows direct connection to his repeater, and the way you do that on a C4 FM radio is you have a digital ID for transmit, a digital ID for receive. If you set your digital normally those are set to 00 that we use for our own repeater. If you set an ID to 47 for transmit, when you key up, it'll actually then connect it via the internet to the KA6 SUB system, or his repeater up in Gold Run, which means you'll get access to that repeater as well as the repeaters that he is connected to, and he has a kind of a permanent connection to other repeaters, as well as he also has a Wires X room that he's connected to. So if you do the ID of 47, you will get a large number of repeaters that you'd be talking to. Now, for our own local use, you would use transmit ID of 00 and a receive ID of 00, which would then, you would not be linked to them. If you're actually up in Gold Run or that area and you can access his repeater, if you do a digital ID, transmit ID of 05, that will come back and link into the W6EK repeater. So we're not always linked into it. In fact, if there's no activity, if we are linked and there's no activity, it'll actually disconnect after 30 seconds of no activity. So if you go up in the Gold Run area and you're actually seeing that repeater, you do ID of 05, that will then link you back into the W6EK repeater, and then W6EK would then be tied into Ken's system, which means his repeater plus all the repeaters that he's tied into. And then, as I mentioned, after no activity, the 30 seconds, that you'll disconnect. One thing you have to be careful of is that if you actually did try to connect in with the 47 to Ken's, and you forget to change it back to 00, the next time somebody calls you on the repeater and you answer them, you'll actually reconnect back up to Ken's system. So, and that could be a problem if his system is busy. A lot of people talking. You may have to actually ask somebody to stop talking for 30 seconds in order to get the repeater disconnected. So this is a chart of the connections. Where the W6EK repeater is on the very bottom left corner there, and everything else is shows that they're interconnected. So that purple going around showing that all the repeaters are connected. Ken's repeater is at the very top in the center. So, and then on the right-hand side there, says permanent IMRS link. Digit ID is 47. So if you do 47, you'll connect to all these repeaters that are on there. And then on Ken's repeater at the very top, you can see it kind of goes off to a bubble that says wires X connection. So the wires X is now another room that he's connected to, which means you can be connecting to a lot of repeater systems. But the key thing here is that the W6EK is not permanently part of this network. Only when you do the digit ID, transmit ID of 47, do you actually connect into all these other repeaters. And then this shows the wires X that Ken has on his system. Ken's repeater is the very upper left, and it shows that the IMRS network is tied into him, and then he is tied into the W7CTK hub, which is down in the center. And so you can see there's some other rooms there. Plus, it also ties into FCS 468. So it goes into Taft, California, and Nevada City, California, and Bakersfield, California, and the Gold Run. So the bottom line is that if you do an ID of 47, you will be tying into all the repeater systems and any of the traffic and stuff that may be on those systems. Okay, and the last slide here is I just kind of want to talk a little bit about just some general repeater etiquette, I guess, or best practices. The first one for All-Star is just don't bridge other nodes to the W6EK repeater. On the ClearNode net, we get this a lot, is that people will be making connections, and with their ClearNode, they can actually, which is an All-Star node, they can tie into other nodes. Well, they may listen to the Blind Hams network, and they listen to us. If you don't disconnect before you connect to the new node, you can actually connect the nodes together, which is not good. So we find that a lot, and Brian ends up disconnecting a lot of nodes that way. That people will forget, and they'll just before they leave one node, they won't disconnect. They'll just go to another node, and now the two nodes are together. So that's kind of a no-no. So just something to be careful of. On wires X, the fact that if you want to change the room that the either repeater is connected to, is to bring it back to where you found it. It's kind of like putting the lid down on the toilet seat. Once you're finished using it. So the idea is just to go ahead and bring it back to the node or to the room that it was actually defaulting to. That way, it's there for somebody else. If you're going to move it to another room, the best policy is to ask first, because somebody, maybe there may be a conversation going on, or some traffic going on, or somebody's waiting for somebody to answer them, and so you may not want to. You may want to ask if anybody is using the room, or if it's okay to move it before you actually do. So it's just kind of good practice. On All-Star and Echolink, because it is digital and there is some delays that are going on through the internet, it's always best that when you push to talk on your node radio is to wait a couple seconds, just so that the first part of your conversation is not cut off. And I even notice that on the repeater itself, especially when I'm listening on a clear node or a node, that if somebody keys up really fast and starts talking, I'll miss the prefix to their call. So it's just kind of a good policy is just to press the button, wait a second or two, then actually talk. And then next, the last one here is on all modes. It's always best to when you before you key up, is just to wait a few seconds. Not just quick key right after somebody has dropped the repeater. Just somebody drops it, wait a couple seconds. That gives a chance for somebody to break in, or it gives a chance for emergency traffic to come through. And also gives a chance for anybody who may be on Echolink or All-Star. It does take a little bit longer time for them to react because there is some delay, so they may not actually hear the repeater drop until maybe a second or two after it really does in some cases. So it's just kind of a good practice and just something that's good to follow. And this last one here is for Brian. Don't chunk the repeater. If you want to test the repeater out, just press the button and say, give your call sign and say this is a radio test. That way it's actually a better test because you actually find out how well you're hitting the repeater versus just, seeing if you can chunk it, because you may be able to, but you may have 50% white noise or something, and it doesn't really give you a good indication there. Anyway, so that's just kind of a set of good practices I think it'd be good to follow. And that's it. So any questions or comments? Alan.
You showed a slide there that showed like all the repeaters that are connected here in California. And when you connect into that, that one there, what is the delay like from A to Z? Is there a big lag between when it goes from one repeater to the next repeater to the next repeater?
Well, okay. Yeah, the question was on this slide here, which showing all the repeaters interconnected, is there a lag from one repeater to the next when somebody's trying to connect? And the answer is when you have multiple repeaters connected, there's always a lag going on because you're going through the internet. So you have latency of the internet. It takes time for them to respond. This is actually not the W6EK set of repeaters. This is the repeater system that we would connect into if we use the digital code 47 for Ken's repeater. Yes, Brian?
And the delay is actually much shorter. If you're used to the old linked systems, RF to RF to RF, there's no 5-second wait. I mean, we're talking about within a second. Yeah. But give yourself a break of a second or two, head and tail.
Yeah, but it is a good point that if you are knowing that you're connected to these different repeaters, and it's also true of Fusion or DMR or any of the other ones, if you're connecting to a whole bunch of repeaters, it's always best to key up, wait a few seconds, and then talk. And also be aware that you are bringing up a lot of other repeaters too. So, if the conversation doesn't need to be with all these repeater systems, you might want to break the connection. Greg?
So to the code 47 thing, to clarify, you punch in the 47 as your transmit ID, you key up, that action of keying up causes our repeater to get linked into that whole menagerie up there, and people will hear you on our repeater as well as all the people on those repeaters.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So the question is doing the 47 for the Fusion, the C4FM. Yeah. If you do a digital ID of 47, that when you key up, that will be transmitted and it will cause all these other repeaters to be linked
for the 30 seconds.
It'll be linked for as long as there was activities.
Up to 30 seconds of silence and all that kind of. Okay. So it's not a wormhole. You're not keying through a little wormhole into the other stuff. You're linking the systems together.
Yeah, you're basically linking the systems together, and that 47 will then cause the link to occur, and it will stay there as long as you talk and as long as there are activities. Once the activity stops for 30 seconds, then it will drop back down. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.